Hi, I'm Rick Miles, Senior Director of Product Management here at Zscaler, and I'm really excited to join everyone today to talk about the next generation of Zero Trust network access innovations. We pioneered the first generation of ZTNA back in 2016 and have seen it absolutely take off with the boom in remote work and digital transformation. This acceleration towards that new normal of work from anywhere, work from home, combined with the countless attacks on vulnerable VPN infrastructure, led organizations to truly recognize the value of our zero trust approach. Zscaler has become the favored remote access technology for enterprises over high-risk legacy SSL and IPsec VPN solutions. Furthermore, Gartner predicts that within just the next 3 years, by 2025, this trend will continue and over 70% of enterprises will phase out their legacy VPNs in favor of ZTNA. So what are the hallmarks of that first-gen ZTNA? Well, first and foremost, eliminating your attack surface is a key shift in approach. So making applications invisible to the internet, making them go completely dark. If you're publishing your applications to the internet, they're easily discoverable and can potentially be exploited. So how do we do this? Well, starting from the application as the destination, we have an application connector that's deployed next to your internal applications, wherever they exist, that creates an inside-out brokered connection to the Zero Trust Exchange. Now, a really important point here. No inbound connections. And as I mentioned, the applications are invisible from the internet. Zero attack surface. I mean, it's hard to target what you can't even see. So now from the device perspective, we go through those same steps. A client-initiated connection is created to our Zero Trust Exchange. So key here is that there are zero pass-through firewall VPN connections, and we aren't bringing the user onto your network. Then we further eliminate lateral movement with our industry-leading user-to-application segmentation capabilities. So for each transaction, we check identity, device posture. We subject the request to our powerful policy engine, and ultimately, if allowed, connect the named user to the named application. So again, zero attack surface as the applications are invisible, and zero lateral threat movement as you're connecting to an application, not a network. So it's these distinguishing traits that define first-gen ZTNA. Today, we're proud to launch numerous industry-first security innovations that evolve the ZTNA category. With this next generation of ZTNA, we help you connect, segment, and protect your users, workloads, and devices. So first, we're bringing zero trust to cloud workloads. Just as we segment users to applications, we segment applications to applications in multi-cloud environments across cloud providers such as AWS and Azure. Second, we're bringing zero trust to the factory floor with user-to-device segmentation that provides fast, secure, and reliable access to OT systems and IoT devices. And in these IIoT, OT environments, you often are required to extend access to third parties or BYOD users. So here we're launching our new privileged remote access capabilities, extending RDP and SSH access to our clientless access offering, providing a flexible and secure approach without the need to install a client or connect to a VPN. Now, moving forward to protect, with our private application protection capabilities, customers get immediate visibility into compromised users and application behavior to stop active attacks on internal web applications and avoid potential disruptions, just like we saw with the Log4j 0 day that rippled across the world in 2021. Furthermore, we can now also actively defend against our toughest adversaries and detect target attacks from threat actors and malicious insiders with our integrated deception capabilities, seamlessly deploying application decoys across your zero trust architecture and leaving landmines to queue high-fidelity IOC alerts into your SOC. Lastly, we're extending our web isolation capabilities with cloud browser isolation to not only provide an effortless user experience with agentless access to these applications, but also to protect against data loss by stopping third parties or on unmanaged devices from downloading or copying and pasting data down to their device and walking out the front door with it. Today, we're launching what we believe is the future of ZTNA. To deep dive into our first innovation, private application protection, let's turn to Pooja.
Thank you, Rick. Hi, I'm Pooja Deshmukh. I'm Principal Product Manager with Zscaler. Let's take a look at the newly introduced Private App Protection. When your applications are behind Zscaler Private Access, they are completely invisible to the outside world. Only authenticated and authorized users can reach them. But what if the user or the device were compromised? A sufficiently advanced attacker can attempt to exploit known application vulnerabilities against you. To make it easier to detect hidden threats and malicious traffic to private apps, we are delivering new app protection in ZPA. This functionality provides visibility in traffic destined to your private applications. It protects you against the most pervasive vulnerabilities and attacks such as cross-site scripting, cookie poisoning, SQL injection, remote code execution, and more. It can also help you virtually patch applications while your DevOps and IT teams are fixing the CVE at its root in private apps. Let's take a look at the controls that give you immediate visibility from day one. We have introduced a predefined repository of inspection controls refined by Zscaler's experienced security research team. These controls map directly to OWASP Top 10, which is considered the industry standard in app security. Our research team has enhanced and fine-tuned these controls for maximum efficacy. We carefully maintain the control numbers, recommended severity, recommended actions, categories per OWASP guidelines. You can selectively turn these controls on or off. Using different profiles, create different traffic behaviors to address whatever your business needs. For example, take these predefined controls. They look for threat signatures and can be deployed in silent monitoring mode for internal employees. You can use the exact same threat identification controls to actively block traffic inline if a user connects to private app using non-corporate device. This gives you the ability to layer up protection for private apps based on different behaviors. It is criteria-driven, effective, and dynamic. We understand that private applications differ in purpose and design. Not all private applications are the same. So the feature is designed to also provide tailored protection. For example, block zero-day threats when CVE or software vulnerabilities have only just been discovered and patches don't yet exist. Create a virtual patch for your private applications. Once you enable the private app protection, it detects application-level threats, even encrypted threats at layer 7. Let's take a look at how security practitioners can derive benefit. The dashboard summarizes the most important information admins need in a single view. Here, they get instant visibility into which applications are experiencing threats, types and categories of threats, and the volume of traffic being affected. See that 0.02% malicious traffic? We find that needle in a haystack for you. And of course, who is behind this malicious activity? Identity of the culprits. This serves as an anchor. From here, to facilitate triage, you can dive deeper into diagnostic logs, where you can see an incredible level of detail on every transaction that was inspected by App Protection Engine, including the threat details, actions taken, user detail, execution trace, and much more. Yes, we do log all the details. Private application protection is a critical defense for breaking kill chain by stopping attackers deploying exploits against vulnerable applications. Later during the session, we will show you how ZPA disrupts the entire attack lifecycle. But for now, back to you, Rick.
Thanks, Pooja. This is really going to be a game changer for ZTNA. With this foundational framework, organizations will not only be able to reduce the risks they face from third parties and high-risk insiders accessing their private applications today, but also prevent future attacks on those private applications. These inline defenses are necessary for real-time protection against compromised users and evasive attackers. That's why we've also integrated our cutting-edge deception technology in ZTNA. Now, with integrated deception, we constrict attackers' ability to move laterally even further with application decoys that lure them away from real apps and contain threats immediately. This disrupts the kill chain and leaves no room for adversaries to maneuver around your private apps. So, to tell you more about how integrated deception works, let's turn to Amir.
Thank you, Rick. Identity compromise and lateral movement are some of the most challenging issues to solve for. That is why I'm very excited to share that starting today, we are giving organizations the ability to detect compromised users, stop lateral movement, and limit the impact of targeted attacks with deception-based threat detection and containment capabilities. Our next generation ZTNA makes deploying decoys of private apps, servers, databases, and other IT artifacts a push-button capability. These decoys blend into the environment and appear as lucrative targets for attackers to exploit. Lures on endpoints in the form of decoy passwords, bookmarks, cookies, and browser sessions identify users that have been compromised and divert the attacker to decoy applications away from their intended targets, thereby stopping the lateral movement. Because deception is natively built into our Zero Trust Exchange, any detection triggers the Zscaler Private Access policy that cuts off the compromised user from the environment in real time. With integrated deception, defenders can dramatically de-risk their internal attack surface, detect threats that matter faster, and contain attacks at wire speed before they can cause any real damage. Now, let's take a look at how easy it is to set up decoys, detect active threats, and contain them. We'll start by going through the experience of creating decoys and activating them. Zscaler Deception leverages Zscaler Private Access to host and project decoys of private apps, databases, servers, and several other IT systems into your environment. You don't need to set up VMs or additional infrastructure to make this happen. Simply log into the Zscaler Deception console and head over to the Deceive section where we're going to add a decoy. The solution comes preloaded with several personalities to make the decoys realistic for your vertical or use case. Right now, we're going to create a decoy of a Swift server. We'll give it an interesting domain name here, and that's it. The decoy has been created and it's active in the environment. The next step is to create an orchestration rule for containing this attack that I'm going to be demoing in a moment. We're creating this rule to contain an attacker attempting to move laterally. The rule is an instruction for the Zscaler Private Access conditional policy to cut off the endpoint if the Swift server decoy that we just created is attacked. Now that we've seen how easy it is to create and deploy decoys, let's take a look at how you can leverage them to detect the attacks. We're demonstrating a ransomware threat actor attempting to escalate privileges and move laterally. Considering the rise of nation-state sponsored threats, we've taken the attack scenarios from the Conti ransomware playbook. This is the Zscaler Deception dashboard, which will start lighting up with detections as we execute the attack. Now, let's switch over to the attacker's view. I'm going to start by conducting some internal reconnaissance, and will use techniques that most human-operated ransomware campaigns usually do. So first, we're going to look for computers that are interesting for us to move laterally to. Here, we see several interesting hosts, including SQL databases and file shares. I'm going to open one of the network scan devices as an HTTPS server, and this appears to be a Swift server, so it looks like we've hit the jackpot. And it seems to have the existing administrator that they typically use, so we're going to try a typical administrator password here, and as you can see, we're in. Now, the attacker believes that they have compromised a Swift server, but this is the same decoy that we had created, and it has triggered an alert. The adversary thinks they've been successful in escalating privileges and moving laterally, but all their tactics and techniques are being recorded by Zscaler Deception. And we can see here that all of the information for this attacker is directly linked to the username instead of IP address. So you have identity-based context. At this time, we see that the containment rule has taken effect for Jeff Spencer at hallowsbank.local, and this user no longer has access to any resources. So that was Zscaler deception. Our next generation Zero Trust Network Access is the only solution that provides integrated deception today and is already playing a key role in helping organizations defend against targeted threats. That's it for now. Back to Rick.
Awesome, Amir. Thanks. Integrated deception is a powerful and unique tool in defending private applications against targeted attacks. Now let's turn to the operational technology systems that we rely on to assemble our cars and package our food. Factories live and breathe operational technology, and we recognize there's a need for more focus on OT security to protect industrial systems from disruption and downtime. Increased factory connectivity can have massive benefits for manufacturing operations, but it also comes with risks, particularly as supply chains become more interconnected and reliant on third parties, and also as they become increasingly targeted. So these organizations now see an urgent need for zero trust. And with ZPA, we're bringing zero trust to the shop floor and securing access to OT and IoT devices. To tell you more about our next innovation, let's hear from Manish.
Thanks, Rick. Hi, I'm Manish Sahu, the Director of OT Transformation Strategy at Zscaler. Privileged users have access to critical systems and accounts, making them an important attack vector to mitigate. This is important in the industrial and operational technology world, where a single equipment or process failure can cause downtime for production systems, revenue loss, or even dangerous conditions for workers. With our next generation ZTNA, we can enable fully isolated clientless access to internal RDP and SSH servers in OT environments, all without having to install a client on the device or having to go through VPNs that are a persistent attack target. This makes it easy for plant admins, engineers, and even third-party vendors to create remote RDP and SSH sessions from field locations, from the factory floor, from anywhere. Now, I'll be taking you through our end-user experience where you can see for yourself how a fully isolated RDP and SSH session works in the browser. I've configured a portal, portal.zerotrust2, as the privileged remote access portal for a ZPA tenant. Once Lisa hits this portal, she is redirected to a page where she is asked to enter a username or email to sign in. When she clicks sign in, she's redirected to the configured identity provider. Out here, Lisa provides her credentials. After successful authentication, she is redirected back to the privileged remote access portal, where she is displayed a set of tiles, and she only sees the tiles to which she's got access to. So this dramatically reduces the attack surface as compared to VPN, which just connects that user to a particular network. In this scenario, Lisa has access to an engineering workstation, which is a Windows system, as well as a Linux jump box. And here she's going to use the browser-based mechanism for RDPing or SSHing into a system to perform the task which she needs to do. Let's now watch as she connects to the workstation. By clicking on a tile, a new tab is opened and an HTML5 canvas is rendered which displays that RDP session for this particular engineering workstation. Lisa is prompted to enter the AD credentials for this Windows device. If the Windows server is configured with just local accounts, she would just need to provide a local username and password. After providing credentials, she sees the desktop and she's able to interact with a thick client like an OPC expert, where she can connect to an OPC server and perform any troubleshooting, upgrade, maintenance, or patching. She can also use this engineering workstation to jump to another Windows desktop downstream. She can use an on-screen keyboard to issue any commands like function keys or event control alt delete. And once she does that, she can interact with the desktop in the same way she would do with a native RDP client. When she's done, she clicks disconnect to end that remote session and closes the tab to complete her task. No plugins were required for this session. No additional clients were needed to be installed. The beauty of privileged remote access is that it removes any friction for users, particularly third-party vendors on unmanaged devices who might otherwise have to use a VPN appliance to connect to the systems. And just as you saw with RDP, the user gets the exact same fast, easy experience starting an SSH session to accessing the Linux machine. So here, she enters the credentials of a Linux machine. And once she's logged in, she can issue any Linux commands as she normally would. Out here you can see this is actually a Raspberry device, which she's able to remotely connect to using just her browser. Both the RDP and SSH sessions which you saw are fully isolated. They have no clipboard control, there's no copy or paste, there's no file upload. So it drastically reduces the attack surface and the possibility of introducing malware, which is very easy in OT environments. This concludes the end-user experience of the privileged remote console. Rick, I'll turn it back over to you now.
Thanks, Manish. Now, private applications hidden behind the Zero Trust Exchange are protected from compromised users and devices. But what about the data residing inside your applications? So as you're extending access to these critical applications to third parties, contractors, or higher risk groups, you don't want anything highly sensitive to be exposed. Now, no longer do you need a complex, expensive, heavy VDI environment to keep data from transferring onto these unmanaged devices. Now, you can provide secure access to these critical private applications and set policies to do things such as block the download of sensitive data and prevent copy and paste. With ZPA, we ensure that data is protected and never lands on a user's local device with our native browser access and cloud browser isolation technologies. Together, they enable a completely flexible, agentless access to applications for third-party and BYOD users. Again, no client software or user configuration needed, while delivering fully isolated and secure sessions that safely render and stream data to a user's native browser. Now, pulling all this together, the next-gen technologies that you just saw pack in so many incredible features, and by bringing them together into a holistic ZTNA platform, we're able to deliver defense in depth to shrink your attack surface, to prevent compromise, eliminate lateral movement, and stop data loss. Now, to show you the ultimate test drive from the perspective of an attacker, I'd like to invite Deepan to showcase how our platform defends private applications, breaking multiple stages of the attack lifecycle.
Thank you, Rick. Hello, everyone. My name is Deepan Desai. I'm the CISO and Head of Security Research here at Zscaler. Today in my session, I will be walking you guys through a very important stage of a modern targeted attack cycle, right? So let me spend a few minutes walking you guys through what a targeted attack looks like. So the reason why a lot of these modern targeted attacks are successful is the adversary is able to start by discovering all the things that are visible to the external world, right? So the legacy castle and moat network security architecture means you have a lot of your assets that are exposed to the external side, and that is the first stage of the attack. The goal for the attacker over here is to find you. Anything that is exposed, they will look at even your social networking presence, identifying the employee names. And this provides a perfect starting point on what all things can they attack to achieve a compromise. The second stage is where they will attempt to compromise that asset. And this is usually through spear phishing attacks, malware exploits, vulnerability exploits. The goal over there is to have one asset in your environment that they have established complete control of. And from this point onward, this next stage in the attack is where they attempt to move laterally. Now, if you have the legacy architecture, it's a relatively flat network. This is fairly trivial for them to then move around in your environment and reach those high-value assets where they're able to steal a lot of sensitive information. Now, in the Zscaler world, ZTNA makes sure that user-to-app segmentation and app-to-app micro-segmentation are critical part of your overall architecture. And what that means is your users are not on the same network as the application, right? That's number one. Your applications are hidden behind Zscaler Cloud, so the external attack surface goes away. And number three is the attacker is not able to move laterally like you're seeing in this example. So the final stage in these attacks usually ends up with them stealing sensitive information from any of the assets that they've managed to compromise. And these are usually, code bases, financial statements, anything that they can hold the organization accountable, right, to say, in case of ransomware attacks, pay ransom. Now let me walk you guys through what happens once your first asset is compromised, right? There's a huge difference between an asset being compromised and your entire network being taken over by the threat actor. And that's the third stage, which is where they're trying to move laterally. What we're going to look at now is we will double click on the lateral propagation stage. And there is a huge difference between an attacker able to compromise one of the asset in your environment versus your entire environment being compromised. And that's where this stage plays a very important role. So we're going to start with an environment where there is a compromised asset, which is behind Zscaler Private Access. That's what you see on the screen, right? And the typical first step from that point onward is the attacker will try to recon the environment. What are the machines that are reachable? They will also look at things inside the machine's memory, browsing history, things like that to identify those critical assets. And depending on the expertise of the threat actor involved, they may do something more stealth versus more aggressive. In this case, for the purpose of the demo, we will be doing a pretty short scan for a very specific ports, because my goal today is to perform a log4j RCE exploit, and I want to identify all the web applications and potentially some developer systems as well that I'm able to reach through this compromised asset. So I'm going to hit scan over here. I'm just using a simple nmap scan, and this is the range that I was able to identify from the system based on some of the SSH keys that I found, and here are the results, right? So I'm seeing 3 hosts that are up, and I'm able to reach from this machine. And I also see that there are these 3 ports that I was looking for. All of those are open on the system as well. Now, me as the attacker at this stage realizes that they have identified 3 assets. The next stage usually is they will try to fingerprint those assets. They may even try to connect to those, right? And this is where what really happened is Zscaler's active defense technology is being used by the organization in this scenario. All those 3 systems that were tactically planted in the compromised endpoint, right, as part of our deception deployment, were decoys, right? They are not real applications. And when the user attempted to scan that, or even when they try to access that, your SOC team will see an alert. This is me switching to the admin panel of our active defense product, Zscaler Deception product. And your team will have detailed information available, telemetry, event logs that can then be leveraged to orchestrate response. Right? We've rightly flagged this as lateral movement attempt from a potentially compromised asset. So switching back to the compromised machine, now at this stage, if I were to look at your SOC team's side, your team has ability to restrict access for this compromised user so that you're able to do things like step up auth, right? So invoke multi-factor authentication. You are able to leverage Zscaler cloud browser isolation, which I will also talk about at the later half of the demo. And your team can essentially block access to your internal application for this users because of the potential post-compromise activity. Now, let's say there was a Log4j, there was a web server inside the environment behind ZPA that the user has access to, right? And this is that asset. As you already know by now, the user never ends up on the same network as the application. Right? There's no IP address being assigned, so there's only layer 7 access. What you see on the screen right now is the attacker is trying to run a simple GET request, which is using the Log4j exploit string. So this string will, if the server is vulnerable, it will result in a connection going out to the attacker controlled machine. This is our external attacker controlled machine that I will show you shortly. Right, so the attacker machines are visible on the right side of the screen. So this is my internal Log4j vulnerable application. It is behind ZPA. And what you see at the bottom of the screen is the attacker server. So this is the view the attacker will see when the vulnerability exploit is successful. The attacker will also get a full remote shell access that is visible over here. So I have a simple netcat listener listening on port 999. So let's execute the attack. I just fired off the exploit. As you can see on the right, at the top, the request was received. There were some exceptions, but more importantly, the exploit string was received by the vulnerable internal application. Now, the vulnerable Log4j library will interpolate this string and make that JNDI lookup to the attacker control server, which you can see over here. The payload command over here is simply instructing the vulnerable system to make a netcat and provide remote shell access to the attacker, right? This is the attacker machine. And I'm just serving the stage 2 payload that will allow me to execute that on the vulnerable server. So let's take a look at our netcat instance as well, whether we were able to get full access or not. So I did receive the connection from the vulnerable server. I am now able to execute arbitrary commands. I can look at all the stuff that is present on the file system of that vulnerable internal application because of the remote shell, right? And from this point onward, I could download arbitrary payloads and perform additional activity on the server. Now, what we have done as part of our recent innovation is we have added inline inspection capability on Zscaler Private Access side as well. So let me actually show you guys how your team will be able to prevent and add security controls to safeguard against Log4j like zero-day exploit attempts. So I just logged into our admin panel for ZPA. I'll quickly show you the inspection part of the product. So this is where there are thousands of predefined rules that will be available that are sourced through Threat Labs, which is our security research team. And then your team will also be able to write custom signatures, which is defined under this custom controls. And I have a custom control written for Apache Log4j over here. It is defined as allow, which is why my attack was successful. But let's go ahead and edit this one, right? So I'll show you what all things are configurable from your security standpoint. So you are able to define what headers you want to inspect. You are able to define size. This is the pattern that we have embedded over here, right? So we're just simply looking for JNDI in this case and ending with that. And then what type of policy action you want to take. So I'm going to change this to block, and we're going to read on that exploit attempt shortly. And then you're also able to define what severity this, if this alert were to trigger, what severity should your team respond to it with, right? So in this case, it's clearly a RCE, should be critical, and I'm going to save this. So now, if I were to repeat the same exercise that we just did, where we're trying to exploit an internal application from a compromised system, I'm going to get a block page, right? The attacker won't be able to successfully exploit the vulnerability. Your team will also get visibility of this, right? So there will be an alert that will get triggered as part of our web inspection flow. Right? So this is that exploit attempt getting triggered, and you will be able to have full telemetry information around the requests that happened, right? Which control triggered, what were the different parameters used, so that your team is able to then take action. Right? So this is yet another security signal that your team gets on the ZPA side. The first one I mentioned was deception, where if someone inadvertently hits one of those decoys, you could orchestrate a response. Second is our inline security inspection, where we will then block it and your team has ability to orchestrate a response. The third piece is Zscaler Cloud Browser Isolation. Right? So a user that is deemed as risky because of some of the activity that I just showed you, you will be able to have a policy that says that when one of the risky user attempts to access a business critical application, I would want to isolate that session. Right? And what that will allow you to do is the user will not be able to download any content on their system. Right? So if I'm accessing an internal application from the compromised system, my access will be through an isolated instance. It's just stream of pixels that will get delivered. And that essentially allows the organization to prevent data exfiltration, right? Which is the last stage. So the user will not be able to dump large volumes of data from internal app to compromised system and then exfiltrate it to an external attack surface, attacker control server. That brings me to the end of the live demo. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Deepan. Zscaler continues to push the industry forward with this next evolution of ZTNA. We're going beyond secure connectivity and shrinking your attack surface. We're continuing to innovate to prevent compromise, eliminate lateral movement, stop data loss, and help organizations achieve true zero trust. We're here to help you with your zero trust journey. Take the next step. Reach out, engage, and request a hands-on test drive from one of our experts on our next-gen ZTNA innovations. Thank you all for your time here today.